Oh, hello. Today's video is going to be about the Fellgor Ravagers. That's right, it's finally time to look at some goats. So, the Fellgor Ravagers. They have Recon and Seek and Destroy. Arguably the two strongest archetypes right now, which is great. And they're a really simple one-box build team, which is, I think, fantastic. So, you get your Fellgor Ironhorn, who is your leader. Now, he has options. He can have a corrupted plasma pistol. He can have a corrupted pistol and a corrupted chainsword, or a plasma pistol and a bludgeon. You take the plasma pistol. Like, you can make weird edge case arguments for why you might want to take the other one, and it's very much a case of, if it's a Thursday and your opponent is facing west and wearing green trousers kind of a thing, like, maybe, but you're going to buy one box, unless you really want to magnetize the little tiny goat arms. Just build the guy with the plasma pistol, right? That's what you're not going to regret. And then it's one of each specialist. So you got your Deathknell, your Flux Bray, your Nile Scar, your Gohorn, your Herd Goad, Mangler, Shaman, Toxorn, and Vandal, and there you go. And then in theory you can have warriors, but you won't be taking basic warriors. They are pointless. So that's really good. I really like really simple, straightforward. Here's the box. You're done. You've got everything you could possibly need. Quite teams. That's quite good. So let's get into it. And here's the big one. Frenzy. So unless you've been in a kind of let's say on a spiritual retreat or visiting relatives in I don't know, the polar wastes, you've seen the arguing, not necessarily arguing, it's not ambiguous, I guess the rending of garments over the frenzy rule. I've had people here in my comments saying that frenzy is so unambiguously broken that how could the game possibly exist in a state with this rule in? A mewling child with no eyes and no knowledge of Kill Team or the English language could see that this rule was the most catastrophically broken rule ever to have graced the page of rules, and the lead designer of Kill Team should immediately be stripped of his job and whipped naked through the streets of Aberdeen. No. So, it's not... I think it is powerful. I think it will probably get toned down a little in the first balanced data slate, but I want to talk about it a little bit. So, first of all, a recap for people who may not know what it does. Frenzy. The rule's on the screen there, and you can read it for yourselves. Okay? But essentially, if you are killed, incapacitated in the normal way, you gain a frenzied token. You become frenzied. I don't know if you actually feel the need to place a token or not, but that's what you should do. And so the first thing that happens is if you're in combat, your ongoing combat ends. All the dice on both sides are discarded, and your order is set to engage, and you can never again turn it to conceal. You count as injured, and you can't do mission actions or pick up actions. Interestingly, there's no caveat for open door. So if you're playing on Into the Dark and say there's a room with a frenzied goatman in, you just close the door and he's stuck in the room, which I think is very funny. Anyway, so you're then invulnerable, effectively, except for certain specific conditions. So your activation ends, so you do die when your activation ends. You're struck with a critical hit in combat, which, can I just say, for as someone who's... two of my 3 teams that I've ever played in earnest have been Kazakin and Novitiates, are both teams with really quite weak attacks at times, but who can always guarantee a crit in close combat, so... I think Kazakin and Novitiates are having quite a fun time against these goats in that regard, because we can kill them. We guarantee that kill with our weak combat attacks. That's good. Or you're struck with 2 normal combat hits, one after the other, or the battle ends. Now, some people say this is a strong ability. Some people say that it's too strong. The first thing I'll say about it is it needs a lot of clarification about certain things. So if you, let's say you have Headhunter, right? And you incapacitate the leader, but then instead of being incapacitated, he's frenzied. And then later, you don't manage to kill him again with a critical hit in combat or striking him with normal combat hits. He instead dies because his activation ends. Does he still count as having been killed by your team for the purposes of like Headhunter? Like, I'd say so, and the same with all the other Tack Ops that require you to kill models. Like, I'd say so, but that I think needs to be technically to be FAQ'd. I think that's and weirdly that's not been mentioned by people because they're too busy rending their garments over the balance issues to point out the things that are a little bit not quite clear. So that needs an FAQ. The other thing that I think might be a little bit, I don't think it is contentious. I think saying when the battle ends means that you're alive at the end of turning point 4 at the point at which objective control is looked at, but then you're dead for the purposes of route, I think, where you have to kill somebody and then be alive at the end of the battle. Well, you're dead at the end of the battle, so you're not necessarily getting the second VP there. That's my read on that, but again, I think maybe that is just one of those things that's ambiguous enough to need an FAQ. I think less ambiguous things have been FAQ'd in the past, let me put it that way. So those would be my 2 notes for the kill team development team that definitely watches my channel. I don't know. I do think it is a strong ability. I have a theory. Okay. Bear with me. This is going to have a little mini shower thought in the middle of a team rundown video. Is it possible that the community is playing on terrain that is different to the playtesters? And the reason I sort of say this, obviously I've no knowledge of what the playtesters do or don't do. The reason I'm sort of saying this is I know that there are, especially the London scene, right? There's a couple of people that put out, there's a map pack, like a London Wargaming Guild map pack, and there's Ryan from Turning Point Tactics, I think, produces a map pack that a lot of people use. And then I know that Can You Roll a Crit did a video recently on his take on maps, and that's just within the London scene. I think there are, I'm not quite clear whether the Turning Point Tactics and the London Wargaming, I'm not sure are they the same pack. Like, I'm not in that scene, I'm just aware of it because it looms large. So there are these maps around that people are routinely playing on, and my perception is those map packs are very anti-shooting and create an environment where a melee team would do really well. So I think that, like, Pathfinders, when they were really powerful, and Vetguard have cast this long shadow, and people are building really cagey maps where they're being really careful about things, overlooking other things, and not letting it be easy for you to get shots. And I think it's this environment that a lot of people are playing in, and that they kind of believe is that's how you play Kill Team. That's how we've been doing it for years. That's the core Kill Team thing. And it's the same people who you kind of hear about how really powerful Galapox are, right? Now, fast forward to Warhammer Fest, there are a lot of Galapox players complaining, that I heard kind of rumblings of, saying, oh, well, there's no doors in the Octarius, and things are wide open, and it's very hard to get cover, and I can't get my guys out without them getting shot. And a lot of Galapox players, at least sounded like their team was not performing to the standard which they expected it to. Now, look, I want to be absolutely clear. This is not me having a go at the London scene, Turning Point, Ryan from Turning Point Tactics, any of these people. I think they're all, in fact, if you don't listen to Turning Point Tactics, I'll give them a shout out. They are the best Kill Team channel if you want to actually hear from someone that is good at Kill Team, as opposed from someone who just likes to talk a lot, right? Go give them a look. They're really good guys, really friendly guys. I'm just trying to point out that maybe there's a difference, and difference is not a value judgment. Nobody has to come in here and defend anything to me. I'm not saying anything better or worse. It's not a value judgment. But is it possible that the playtesting is happening on boards that are similar to what was happening at Fest? Because after all, that's Games Workshop, isn't it? And that's Maybe it's the same ideas, the same people, the same minds, the same thinking. So what I'm kind of saying is maybe when you play tested the goats on a board that's not dissimilar to like a Warhammer Fest layout, if that's what's happened, and I'm just supposing, did they just get shot off before they could do anything? And is that why this rule has come across as quite strong? Whereas a lot of people who play in London are sort of saying, oh, well, of course, they'll be able to maneuver safely in turn 1 and not really get shot, because that's just what happens in turn 1. And so I'm wondering if there's a disconnect there, right? And what would solve the issue, and I've beaten this drum before and I'm going to continue to beat it, is that Games Workshop should publish their own map pack using the standard terrain in the Kill Team box. I was hoping that was what was going to come with Season 3, that we get Season 2 style maps, but for the Season 3 terrain for the open world, but with fixed terrain locations. No particular reason, but I don't feel that's likely anymore. Just the vague whisperings that we've heard point to something that's once again going to be a more novel and narrative shake-up of the way we play rather than a really deeply mechanical one. But I could be dead wrong about that. So, yeah. I think that might be the reason. So do I think these rules need a nerf? And I'm not prepared to say that it needs a big nerf. But I've not played as them. I've not played against them. I don't really know what it feels like. I know a lot of people say, I can just read the rules and I can read them and I can see instantly this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, maybe that is true for you. It's just not true for me. Maybe I'm very stupid. I don't know. I would say a couple of things that jump out as perhaps needing tweaking. It seems obnoxious to me. Yeah, don't let them get shot off the board. Fine, I get that. It seems obnoxious to me that if they charge you, and you manage to kill them on a turn they've charged you, the combat ends, and then their activation will end, and then they will die. Right? But if you charge them, the combat ends, and then for your trouble, you're stuck in combat, and then they can activate and hit you in the face. Like, that seems unfair. It seems unfair that they get that little bit of advantage. So maybe you just make it so that you don't frenzy, you just die if you're killed in close combat, right? That seems, if you think as I think, that the whole purpose of the frenzy rule is to allow the player of the Beastman to do something, right? So he doesn't feel like I've been shot off. I've been shot off the board by Pathfinders. This is a rubbish game. I've not got to roll any dice. I've not got to live out my power fantasy of charging forwards like a mad corn-worshipping bestial muscle thing and tearing. Like, it's not my power fantasy, but it definitely is a common one. It's definitely somebody's tearing people limb from limb, nostrils flaring, all that stuff. I've not got to live that out. I feel like my day's been ruined. I get that. So give them the rule, but I just think if somebody charges you in combat, if you get to fight in that combat, if you get to roll dice, do you need the frenzy mechanic on top of the close combat thing? I don't know. Maybe just let the fight phase continue so that they get a little bit of benefit from it. So if you kill them in combat, then it's like, okay, you've killed them, but they get to resolve all their other dice, so maybe they kill you. Maybe do it that way if you feel they need the advantage of frenzy even when they've been charged. But that then makes charging them, somehow they're stronger than if they charge you. So I just think maybe they just die, right? They just die at the end of the combat. If you hit them in combat, they die. I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think that's unreasonable. But then if you're going to do that, what's the sense in making it so you have to hit them with a crit or with 2 successive... but then again... Yeah. I don't quite know how you fix it, but my anxiety is around that. The other question that people have is, should they be able to contest objectives? It does make goats... I mean, loot is already a very swingy mission. It does make them super swingy on loot because they're just going to have a far harder time because they lose the ability to loot the objective when they've been shot, but they don't lose the ability to control an objective. So 2/3 of the time they're going to be really strong, and then 1/3 of the time when you're playing loot, they're going to suffer a little bit. Loot's already this really swingy thing that skews games. I don't think it's designed that way. I don't think it's a problem per se, but it is something to think about. I don't feel comfortable asserting they need to lose the ability to control objectives while frenzied yet. Okay, so that's Frenzy. Let's get into the actual stats. Now listen, before I go through all the cards, the thing is, there's not that much to say here. Because it's a fixed build team, because it's literally just you take all the specialists, there's not a lot of, oh, well, this guy might be better and this guy might be better, which I always think is the meat and potato of these videos. It's more or less just, here's what you get. So if you haven't found out already, haven't read the cards, here's what you get. You get an Iron Horn. The Iron Horn is your leader. He gets a plasma pistol, which is cool. He's only hitting on 4s with this plasma pistol. You know, he's not the best shot in the universe, but it does the plasma pistol thing. Now, he has Call the Attack. This is really powerful. Once in each strategy phase, when it's your turn to use a strategic deploy or pass, you can use this ability instead. If you do, select one friendly Fellgor Ravager operative visible to this operative, the selected operative, and all friendly Fellgor Ravager operatives visible to and within white of it can immediately perform a free dash. That's really good. You know, it's more mobility for your team that needs to get up there in people's faces. This is a really nice ability. You'd be sad if this guy was dead at the start of turn 2 or the start of turn 3 and you didn't get to do that dash ability, right? But especially at the start of turn 2. The Deathknell. So the Deathknell's funny. He gets an extra point of armor, so he has a save of 4+. He has a small aura denying crits. So each time an attack dice would inflict critical damage on a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative within blue of this operative, you can choose for that attack dice to inflict normal damage instead. That's nuts. That's really good. And of course it affects him. He has a standard icon bearer, so he counts as APL 3 for controlling objectives, and for 1 AP he can turn on his 3+ invulnerable save. So basically this guy is a tanky, objective squatting person who's going to sit on an objective, be quite difficult to shift compared to the rest of your team. And if you're playing against a team where you need another guy to get 5 APL effectively, instead of the 3 that he's got, then anyone else that's near him will also gain the effect of the War Gong and not be able to be crit, which is quite nice. So he's gonna help you try and catch objectives. Be good to get him in there on central objectives, especially against an APL 2 team. Force them to use 2 models to sit around on and try and get this objective off you. Yeah, good utility piece. The Flux Bray. The Flux Bray is a pretty interesting specialist. So, I'm comparing most of the weapons to the bludgeon, right? So 4/4 damage, brutal, 3 up is kind of the baseline. So this guy gains an extra point of crit, so it's 4/5. He loses brutal, but instead you can choose between relentless and deflect. Relentless is reroll as many dice as you want, which is nice. Deflect it should really be one of the universal special rules, right? If they do a new edition of Kill Team and it's like a minor tidy up, then definitely one of the universal special rules would be you can resolve 1 successful hit before the attacker, and that successful hit must be a parry. So if you're charged, you can go for deflect, you can go for the defensive thing. If you're attacking, you might still go for the defensive one, but you'll probably go for relentless. Yeah. Then he's got this Cleaver Flurry, which is an interesting thing. Cleaver Flurry, it's not an ice cream. Cleaver Flurry. Perform a free normal move action with this operative. For that action, it can move an additional circle and can move within engagement range of an enemy operative, but can't end the move there. Each enemy operative that moves within engagement range suffers D3+1 mortal wounds. Roll separately for each. This operative cannot perform the action if it has a conceal order. So yeah, he can move in a path and he can do splash damage type stuff, or chip damage, I should say, to the people that are in his way. The damage is nice. I kind of feel like the way this is mainly going to be used is as a movement bump to get onto a middle objective somewhere, or an objective that's slightly just outside your reach normally, to kind of try and get a jump on the primary in turning point 1. But yeah, but he's a killy model as well, but he's got that, because he's got that cleaver flurry I should say, allows him to do a really long move, even if he doesn't injure anyone else. That's quite useful in its own right. The Nile Scar. So the Nile Scar has a bionic fist. So it's an extra point of crit damage, and yeah, they have brutal as standard, so he has brutal. For 1 AP, he can fight and shoot, or shoot and fight, and he can shoot into combat. So for 1 AP, you could fight, and then if after the end of the fight phase your guy's still alive, you could shoot him, and if he's not alive, you could shoot somebody else. Alternatively, if you're worried that you might die in the fight phase, you could shoot first into combat, and then fight and hope to kill them before they kill you. He's a very murderous goat. He's our first murder goat, so we'll call him straightforward Murder Goat the first. And he can change his activation as well at the end of his order, which doesn't seem to really synergize, but it's still nice to have. The Gohorn, straightforward Murder Goat number 2. The Gohorn has an extra point of crit damage over and above the standard weapon for this team, and he trades out brutal for lethal 5+. He can just fight twice. That's just baked in. He doesn't need to spend anything to do it. So he can fight and then fight again. He does have to spend 2 AP, I guess, to do the fight and the second fight. It's not a fight and then a free fight. It's just he can fight and then he can fight again. So we do have a comms type operative coming up. Maybe this is a good guide to try and get 3 APL on, because he doesn't. It's not fight and then fight again for free. So he can heal and also improve his crit damage only while he's fully alive. But if every time he incapacitates an enemy in combat, you roll a d3 and you gain that many wounds, and you also increase the so you add that d3 to your crit damage to a maximum of 8. So if you roll, you got a 1/3 chance of immediately getting it up to 8 after 1 kill, and then you've got a guy with 8 on the crit, which is pretty funky. Lots of things have 8 wounds and will die in 1 hit to somebody with a crit of 8 and lethal 5+. So he's a straightforward Murder Goat the second, really. He's a pretty cool model. Right, the Herd Goat. So this is our sort of rubbish comms. It is a really rubbish comms. It's kind of like the whippy girl in the Novitiates, but it doesn't give you any extra movement, unfortunately. So you've got the Thorn Whip. The Thorn Whip is a kind of a bad close combat weapon. It's 2/3 damage. It does have lethal 4-up and stun, so you can try and stun people with it. It also has a ranged profile, so range blue. Now, interestingly, it's on a 2 at range and it's on a 3 in combat. I don't know if that's intended, or it seems very strange to me. But yeah, if you're within a range blue, you hit on 2. So if you can do, you're probably going to try and deal damage via the range thing. It has a really weird ability that I don't know if it's any good. Whip control. While an enemy operative is visible to and within blue of this operative, and this operative is not within engagement range of any other operatives, subtract 1 from the attack's characteristic of that enemy operative's melee weapons to a minimum of 1. Well, okay. And also they have to spend an additional action point if they choose to fall back. Okay, it's not bad, and it's free, and it's just for being near somebody, so I can't complain too much, but it just seems a bit odd. Incite Fury is his comms ability, so you can't comms a Shaman or an Ironhorn, okay? And you have to be visible and within blue of the operative to get the +1 APL, okay? Not the best, but it certainly has utility. The Mangler. So the Mangler's weapon over the sort of baseline weapon has +2 crit and relentless, and then it has this tactical hunter critical strike rule, which basically means if you crit, you can then immediately resolve another dice, which could, in my reading of the rule, be 2 crits. If you've rolled 2 crits, you could do 2 crits. It's interesting that he can't ever shoot. This model can never ever shoot anything, so don't give him any grenades. And he has to use both his APL to do a mission action, but he can open a door for a single APL. And he can double fight, but in the way that's useful, where you pay 1 AP to get a fight, and then if that opponent's still alive, you can fight again. I'm going to call this guy straightforward Murder Goat the Third. And then the Shaman, so you get a surprise Psyker on your team of just murderers, right? Also reasonable melee weapon, 3/5 stun, not bad, not bad. But he has 3 psychic powers, which is the main reason that you want to know about him, right? So he has Mantle of Darkness. So until the end of the turning point, while a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative is within blue of this operative, enemy operatives more than red from that friendly operative always treat it as having Conceal Order regardless of any other rules, e.g. Vantage Point. So that's Super Conceal is always useful. I'm sure you can find uses for that. As far as I can see, that would work on Frenzied Goats as well, because even though they can't have a Conceal Order, this just says they're always treated as having a Conceal Order. So yeah. Apocalyptic Rejuvenation is a medic ability, so 2d3 lost wounds. And then if you've incapacitated anybody during the battle, you get 6 lost wounds instead, which is great. And Curse Weapon is kind of funny, but I don't... So Curse Weapon essentially is you say that weapon on your team now has Hot, and if already had Hot, it's +1 mortal wound whenever you roll a 1 and would suffer wounds from Hot. But in my experience, teams with weapons that get hot, they usually have... They're used to the idea that they're going to re-roll or use some kind of strategy or do something. Now, this is just me playing Kazakin and Novitiates a lot, right? I don't tend to take mortal wounds from rolling 1s, but it could happen. It's funny. It's something to do. I think you're mainly taking him for the first 2, though, to be fair, and the Curse Weapon is there to give you something to do when you... I guess wouldn't necessarily benefit from either of the other 2 abilities, right? The Toxorn. Can I just say the Toxorn is my favourite miniature in this set because he's cool. He has a bonus point of crit damage over the basic fellows, but he doesn't gain brutal. I think technically the Cleaver is the other option for a basic weapon in this set, but we're not even going to talk about the basic Trooper because for kill team purposes, he's pointless. The Toxorn has some basic abilities, so he never gets stunned or has his APL modified in any way, and he gets a 6-up Feel No Pain. He has a pseudo grenade thing, so it's one of these things where for 1 AP you select a point within red, and then you've abstracted, but you've thrown the grenade at that point, and it lets out the gas. Not as exciting as the Dark Eldar gas grenade. A d6 for each operative within white of the point. If your dice is a 3 or more, it's at -1 APL. If it's a 5 or more, it's 3 mortal wounds. It's fine. It's not incredibly exciting. I think Toxorn is actually, unless I'm really missing something, I think he's... I mean, -1 APL in a cloud, that can really mess with your opponent's game plan, I suppose. But then, if I've got -1 APL, but there's a Toxorn within red of me, I'm going to shoot the Toxorn and then be kind of irritated that I couldn't move. But then the Toxorn's going to frenzy. Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't have utility, it just doesn't excite me as some of the other pieces in the team do. And the model's so cool, I just thought it could have been a little bit cooler. The Vandal. I like the Vandal. The Vandal is just a very violent thing. So, 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, 5/5 damage, Brutal Reap 2, and then Vicious Blows. So if you're the attacker, you have Ceaseless, and if you charged, you have Relentless. Great. Good. You're going to kill people. And then he has a weird AoE thing. So for 1 AP, each other operative visible to him within white of this operative suffers D3+1 mortal wounds. You can't do that. You have a Conceal Order. That's fine, but really this is just a guy that charges forwards and then brutally, viciously man crushes with his brutal, vicious man crusher, right? Good. Right, we're on to the equipment. So that was Oily Goats. And again, I feel like I whizzed through that without necessarily adding much value because You're not making any choices, right? This is the opposite to a lot of teams you've seen recently. I don't need to help you kind of weigh out like, oh, is the Vandal going to be more use than the Mangler? You know, because you're taking both of them. And they both run forward and kill people. So, yeah. Equipment, so they get frag and crack grenades. They're grenades, they do grenade things. Corrupted rounds for buffing your auto pistol, don't bother. Corrupted weapons, so a regular bludgeon or cleaver gains rending, that's potentially useful. Unholy Talisman to give you a 5 invulnerable save, meh. And then the one you're actually going to take is War Paint, right? The operative gains the following ability for the battle. You can ignore any or all modifiers to your movement and APL characteristics. Bearing in mind that when you're frenzied, you are injured and would be on minus circle move and, less APL. I'm fairly convinced that the noob and expert level play for this team is just to take 10 war paints, because it means that your incapacitated goat is going to charge the normal distance and therefore has a decent threat range, right? Which I think is important. There will be people who swear by the frags and the cracks, and they want to spend half of their points on that, and then they only take 5 war paints. There may even be people that like the corrupted weapon, but I am firmly in camp. Just take 10 war paint. Ploys. So we'll start with the strategic ploys. We've got Violent Temperament. Until the end of the turning point, each time a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative fights in combat in the roll attack dice step of that combat, you can use its Violent Temperament. If you do, you must reroll all of your attack dice. You can't reroll some. Statistically weird. I'm sure it's probably useful. I don't know how useful it is. I don't know how comfortable I'm spending a CP for it. Ambush, 1 CP. Until the end of the turning point, each time a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative is activated, if its order is changed from Conceal to Engage, it's ambushing for the activation. Each time a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative that's ambushing fights in combat, in the roll attack dice step of that combat, you can retain one of your successful normal hits as a crit instead. If it has Frenzy, it can't ambush. I think this is your standard plan. You play this once per game, probably at the top of turn 2, when you've tried to position your guys ready to get the charges off they want to get, and then you go into turn 2 and you ambush. Pelting Firepower. I don't even want to read Pelting Firepower. It's a stacking buff for your ranged weapons that are pointless. Who asked for Pelting Fire? Oh, go on, I will read it out of a sense of completeness and obligation. Pelting Firepower, 1 command point. Until the end of the turning point, each time after a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative makes a shooting attack against an enemy operative, that enemy operative gains one of your pelted tokens. Each time a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative makes a shooting attack against an enemy operative, for each pelted token that enemy operative has, add 1 to both damage characteristics of a friendly operative's weapon for that shooting attack to a maximum of 5/6. At the end of the turning point, remove all your pelted tokens. Let's give them a really kind of annoying mechanic to buff their shooting when all they have is auto pistols. No. Reckless Determination. Until the end of the turning point, each time a shooting attack is made against a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative that is not ready in the roll defense dice step of the shooting attack, before rolling your defense dice, you can retain 1 successful normal save without rolling it. Potentially fine, if the situation calls for it, right? Ruthless Rampage. So we're on to the tactical ploys now. Ruthless Rampage, 1 CP. Use this tactical ploy after a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative performs a fight action. It can immediately perform a free charge action, even if it's already performed a charge action in this activation, but it can only move up to blue. Note that it can't perform this free charge action if it's already within engagement range of an enemy operative. So this is also a very often, basically a very sometimes food, but it could be powerful, right? Because you can fight and then charge into the next thing. But, given that if you're frenzied, you're going to be immune to being shot, so it's not really like that advantageous of you to get locked into the next combat, right? If you're frenzied. So it's only really useful in the situation where you've charged, you've fought someone, you've killed them, you're not already frenzied, and then you want to move into another combat so you're safe from a turn of shooting. I can see it for that. Wild Rage. Spend a CP, add an inch to your movement. I don't want to read the whole thing. A CP for an inch is kind of expensive at first glance, but of course you can pre-measure before you activate. So you pre-measure your charge distance or whatever it is you're doing, and if you happen to be out an inch, then you can spend a CP to not be out an inch. So in that regard, it's one of those things, like all good tactical ploys, won't come up most of the time, but when it comes up, you'll be like, oh yeah, good, I can do that, that's good. Animalistic Fury. Use this tactical ploy in the resolved successful hit step of a combat. When a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative strikes with a critical hit, inflict 1 additional damage with that strike for 1 CP. What I like about this one is you can see all the dice, and you've already done the little mental thing of like, well, if I hit you with a crit, then then you parry my other crit, then I hit you with a normal, and so you will know if the 1 point of damage on your crits, on your 1 crit, is going to make a difference to the outcome of the combat or how much damage that you will take before you kill your opponent. Blood Sense is a chain activation, so when one of your operatives incapacitates an enemy within its engagement range, and there's another ready friendly operative eligible to be activated, visible and within blue, you can activate it. Situational, when the conditions are right, you can spend 1 CP to chain activate, which could be really, really very, very useful. So, decent ploys, nothing that you desperately want to turn on, not one of these teams with a ploy that you desperately want to turn on every turn, right? So they're going to have a fair amount of CP for their situational ploys and for the all-important tactical rerolls. Tack Ops. So we got Fellgor Champion. Reveal this Tack Op when a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative incapacitates an enemy operative in combat. If that friendly operative incapacitates another enemy operative in combat, you score 1 VP. If you achieve the first condition again, you score 1 VP. So you need to kill 3 people with 1 goat to get a 2 VP. I feel that that's a bit difficult to score. Once your opponent knows that's what you're doing, they will focus fire on the would-be champion of the Fellgor, right? Scorn their ways, reveal this Tack Op in the target reveal step at the first turning point, select 1 enemy operative equipped with a ranged weapon that has a normal damage potential of 17 or more. This is normal damage characteristic multiplied by its attacks characteristic. If the weapon has more than 1 profile, only one of them needs to fulfill this. If that model is incapacitated by a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative within red, you gain 1 VP. If it's incapacitated by a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative within red, within its engagement range, you score the 2nd VP. So, yeah, I think this is really good as long as you're playing against a team. Not every single team has gunners. As long as the team you're playing against has a valid target for Scorn Their Ways, I think you're probably picking to take Scorn Their Ways. Because killing their plasma gunner in close combat is definitely something this team wants to do. Relentless Aggression, and of course, unlike other I'm going to kill this specific model, it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to hide your really good gunner behind a wall so I can't get to him? Relentless Aggression. At the end of any turning point, if 5 or more friendly Fellgor Ravager operatives are within red of enemy operatives and or your opponent's drop zone, you score 1 VP. If you achieve the first condition at the end of a subsequent turning point, you score 1 VP. I think this is scoreable. I think it's a little harder than Scorn Their Ways, but if you don't like the normal things in the normal deck, it could be a good pick if there's no eligible target for Scorn Their Ways. Talking of the normal decks, I like to talk about them, so I think you're going for Seek and Destroy with the goats. I don't think you want to be messing around with Recon and trying to pick things up and move things around. So things that sound good to me for the goats. Rout. If you incapacitate somebody within red of their own drop zone, and if you do it again, you get 2 VP. Against the right team that you know doesn't want to charge forwards at you, that can be really good. Eliminate guards, yes, really good, with the usual caveats. If you're playing against a 3 APL team on loot, they might not give you a guard to eliminate. Headhunter, especially if it's the kind of team that doesn't want to keep their leader hidden behind a wall. If it's a plasma pistol leader that's going to want to be out and about making use of that, you can go for Headhunter. Executioner, Yeah, I think it's a little predictable for me, but I think it could also be a good shout. So 2 of them. Robin Ransack is a weird one because it has this clause at the end of the battle. If you achieve the condition and that friendly operative has not been incapacitated, you score 1 VP. So my understanding is that if a frenzied model was alive at the end of the battle, they would die before they would be eligible to score the second VP from Robin Ransack. That is, in fact, the point of that you die at the end of the battle clause, right? If I'm very wrong, tell me in the comments and we can bicker, okay? But I think that's the case. What would I go for if I was going for, hypothetically, an all-comers list? Scorn their ways. I like Headhunter, I think. And Route. Yeah, sure. Final thoughts. I think these are a simple team from a list building point of view. They're actually a very noob-friendly team. I think they're simple to pilot. I don't think they have a lot of complicated ins and outs in terms of what you need to do with them. And they're very forgiving. Obviously, if you get shot, you've got the frenzy mechanic, so you can just keep on trucking. I like the team from a rules mechanical thing base, but I don't like their models or their background. So I always say there's 3 pillars in Warhammer. Something has its rules, it has its lore, and it has the miniatures aesthetics. And if you like 2 of those 3 things, then if you purchase it, it'll probably bring you joy. But if you only like one, you shouldn't make the purchase. They might be a bit overtuned, but I don't think it's as bad as some people are making out. I've kind of already made that point earlier in the video. I do think they're a bit... They will cop a little bit of a nerf, probably, like I would guess, but let's not be screaming and rending our garments about it, okay? Do share your opinions in the chat, though, right? Try and keep it civilized, but I do value the feedback from the members, even when it's stuff that I don't agree with. Members, that was a Freudian slip. Of course I value the feedback from my paying members. I mean, I value the feedback from all my subscribers, right? I do. I'm still able, this channel is still small enough that I reply to every comment. I don't always reply to every reply to a comment because the YouTube UI does not make that as easy to find for me from the creator side, but I do reply to every comment that I see. So please do leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, join the Discord, buy all your models from Element Games, and consider joining the channel as a member. You know, some people have. I've got people that have reached their 6-month membership. Last live stream, that was really cool. All right, I'll see you next time. Guys, have a great evening. And probably not tomorrow. I think I'm out tomorrow evening. But maybe Friday, we'll do dwarves. Maybe. We'll see. See you then. Bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye. Bye.